feeling really good today. Sorry. Just feeling good today. That's all I can say. That's all I can say for myself. Oh, come on. Let's go. Sadsic currently right now is a New Jersey-based music producer. He has come out with a slew of different projects in the past, but what we are going to be talking about now is this new self-titled full-length LP that is out via the Collective Resonance label, an electronic music label that has a lot of beat music, beat tapes on there, electronic music, very, very forward-thinking. And on the surface, while this thing may not seem like anything more than your average beat tape on the internet, though it is very dense with about 30 tracks in its regular track listing, from what I understand you can get off of iTunes or Beatport. But if you grab this thing off of Bandcamp for just a few pounds, you actually get an additional 16 tracks added to the track list of this thing, making the final runtime of this altogether about an hour and a half. Thankfully, Sadsic comes off on this thing anyway as a pretty versatile producer man. Not only are the beats he creates on this thing very dense with detail and layers and samples, but his influences seem to spread pretty wide as well. While he definitely loves your underground kings such as Madlib or Jay Dilla, I for sure think that this guy's into DJ Shadow, and even newer acts in experimental hip-hop instrumentals such as Flying Lotus. He is also, I think, pretty into neo-psychedelic music such as Panda Bear or Animal Collective stuff, or even a little Black Moth Super Rainbow. Now this dude loves sampling. So many tracks on this album loaded with samples. He tends to layer them very heavily a lot of the time, which leads to a lot of these sounds just bleeding into one another in a very psychedelic display, in a very trippy tapestry. And the songs themselves sort of fade into one another too. A lot of longer tracks here being somewhat well developed, and they're bookended by the shorter moments that are maybe a minute or less that seem to bring the album from one beat, one groove, one song idea to another. I would say overall this album is a very diverse set of purposeful odds and ends. There are some hip-hop inspired head bobbers on this thing, like the track Citizen Sleepwalk, a moment that opens this album up. Kicks things off with a very jutting bass drum groove. This guy is fantastic at engineering bass. The bass and really everything, considering how dense these productions are, is so well mixed, crisp, everything is really defined. So despite being overwhelming some of the time, I would say a lot of the sounds here are impressively organized, because as Citizen Sleepwalk progresses, we have these choppy vocal samples, these crispy snares that come into the picture, as well as some hand claps, and then on top of it, melodically, we get these swirling organ arpeggios and this very just epic, somber bass line that is moving so slowly, and it takes the track from being just sort of a quirky hip-hop beat to something that's really grandiose. And while there are a lot of really great, punchy, psychedelic cuts on this album that I think are great, the latter half of this abridged version, as it continues through, we sort of get to hear the darker side of Sadsic, the more tender side of Sadsic, the more experimental, atmospheric side of Sadsic, with a league of tracks that some of them are really atmospheric and cloudy and feel a bit like a drone, or kind of like floating through a dream world. Some tracks like Night Phantoms, still a beat, but very, very nocturnal and dark and eerie. There's the title track on here, Sadsic, which is sort of like this really weird noise wall with a beat happening in the background and some mumbled spoken word. Not a favorite moment of mine on here, but I guess it does show some diversity of Sadsic just trying some different things, some of which go over really well, some of which just feel a little boring. However, nothing happens on this album for so long that it makes me want to flip the track, or it really angers me. However, there are tracks on here that I do wish were longer. That's kind of the double-edged sword of making a bunch of tracks that are so short and lumping them in a bunch. While there are tracks on this thing that do feel like filler, there are tracks that for sure are not going to hit you because you just may not find anything special about them. There's no denying the level of ambition that is going into this thing because of how long song it is overall, and how diverse the songs are together. While I don't feel like this album comes together as a cohesive whole, there is something about Sadsic kind of going into this project making sure there's at least a decent, noticeable amount of variety among these somewhat short cuts. I'm going to leave a link down there in the description box to check this album out. Transition. And if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Really, what did you think of it? And what should I review next? Anthony Fantano, Sadsic, forever.